I'm Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House.
And I'm Devyn Caldwell from Our Philly Row. And we're the hosts of True Tales from Old Houses. Hi, Stacy.
Hey, Devyn. How are things in Philly?
Things are pretty good. Spring is in the air, although we have a cold snap coming this weekend. It's sunny outside right now and the birds are chirping.
I could hear those birds earlier, but yes. Well, I'm glad to hear it. I saw 2 snowflakes on my weekly forecast, and I kind of wanted to cry because I am not ready for more snow. I'm ready for a seasonal change that sticks.
Yeah, well, polar vortex in May is never fun.
Yeah, I can't even. We're not doing that. We are not doing that. Well, how is your studio project coming along?
Well, as is the case with old house projects, it's turning into a much bigger project than I thought it would be.
I'm shocked.
I know.
No.
I know. I thought I would be able to get away with a quick paint job, and that's not the case. So I'm going to have to do some plaster repair. And then what's amazing is we have the original floor from 1852, and most of it has never been painted or finished or anything. But it's rough. So I'm going to be hiring a sander to come in here and kind of clean it up a bit, do some light sanding, not heavy. I don't want to make it smooth. Right. I want to keep the character. I'm sure I have hundreds of square nails to sink below the surface. So
you decided to hire out the sanding part?
No, I'm going to rent a sander. We're going to just do it on a weekend.
Oh, gotcha.
It's 100 pounds and we have to get it up to the 3rd floor, but we'll get it up here.
Well, your studio space is going to be so nice when you get it done, and it does not surprise me that it's a bigger project than you planned, but likewise, I know you're up to the task, and I can't wait to see it when it's finished.
Same here.
As for things going on in my house, I am kind of mid everything right now. I did find paint for the staircase project. I think that's what I talked about last time, was sealing the stair treads with Loba impact oil. And I found the matching paint, which was kind of a big deal. So I'm ready to do that at some point. I also have a sad little window that I'm working on in my downstairs workshop that's pretty much more wrought than window. However, I'm repairing it and restoring it to kind of prove the point that there isn't really a window that's too far gone. So
I saw this on your Instagram stories that you're working on, and I'm hoping you'll save that as a save story for people because I want to see how you're transforming. You're basically taking 2 windows, combining them into one. That's correct.
That is correct. Yes. I have some video content. I was thinking about trying to put it up on YouTube eventually. So I've been putting that in together, but it reminded me, Scott Seidler, the Craftsman blog, who posted something similar. Coincidentally, we were kind of on the same wavelength there when I posted that. And something that he said really resonated it to the effect that a window might be more work than you care to do, but the idea of it as too far gone is not really a thing.
That is true. There is always that kind of, at what point is it just pointless?
And there are standards. The Department of Interior, 1/3 gone. But when you're working on something in your own house, then you're kind of making your own determination. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, and the rules don't apply.
The rules don't apply. I'm with you. Well, I guess we will turn to an announcement. We only have one announcement this week.
Yes.
I got this flyer. Rhonda Deeg, who was on our last episode, she's doing, let me pull this flyer up so I can kind of read off of it at the same time. But she is conducting a making and restoring stained glass windows workshop. And that is going to be June 26th, 27th, and 28th. That's this summer. It's at the Belvedere School, which if you're not familiar with the Belvedere School, that is in Hannibal, Missouri. I'm going to stick the flyer up on the show notes so you can read all about it. The chance that it's canceled, I would say, is pretty slim at this point because Missouri is really opening up. That's where my mother lives. I think they're kind of going for it.
Yeah, it seems that way.
So I believe that it would be, if you're interested in learning about making and restoring stained glass windows, I think you could feel pretty safe moving forward and attending or signing up for this workshop. So we'll put all the information that you need right on the show notes. Rhonda is apparently an incredible teacher, so I think it would be worth your time if that's something that interests you.
Sounds great.
Today's episode is a little different than one of our regular episodes. We had planned to air our show with Terry Wollenweber, who is the plaster restorer that I met on our field trip, but we have some sound things to work out in the background, and it just, it's just the way it is. Best laid plans.
It's just not ready. It will be, but it's not right now.
Exactly. So instead, we have preempted that show with a little bit of bonus content that includes a conversation that my friend Drew and I had about our trip. We intended to release it at the end of the season, but instead we're releasing it today. And I wanted to mention too that I already put the videos up on the True Tales from Old Houses website. I thought it would be fun to put those out early so that you could watch them, because then there would be some context for this conversation that my friend Drew and I are having about our trip. Did you get a chance to watch those?
I did. To our listeners, if you want to pause for a moment and go to the website and watch the videos, that wouldn't be a bad idea.
There were so many things that happened on our trip, so many stories that we learned about the Culbertson Mansion, little details about the Emmanuel Baptist Church that that would never make it onto a podcast episode generally in the way that we tell our stories.
Right.
And it also didn't make it to the video because those were meant to just be little snapshots of the trip on the whole. I think you'll have a good time listening to it, but it is a casual conversation. It is a little bit different from our usual format. And so I hope you'll bear with us and enjoy it anyway.
Sounds good. Hey, before we get started, let's tell everyone about the ways they can support True Tales from Old Houses.
Sure, I think it's a good idea. The first way you can help is to spread the word. If you know someone who would love this podcast, tell them about it and explain how and where to listen. The second way to help us is to share us on social media. You have friends, you have followers, let them know about us. That would be great. Use the hashtag True Tales from Old Houses and Devyn and I will surely see it. The third way you can help is to leave a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts. Those ratings and reviews help other people find us and tells them that our show is worth a listen. Finally, over on the True Tales from Old Houses website, you can make a one-time or reoccurring donation to the show. Your donations will go directly towards the cost of producing this podcast and creating more engaging and useful content, and maybe more field trips too. As a special thank you, if you donate in the $20 to $25 range, we'll send you a coffee mug with a True Tales from Old Houses logo on it.
And we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Without you, there would be no True Tales from Old Houses.
Well, I just want to introduce, I guess, since in this little episode, I want to introduce everyone who's listening to my friend Drew. Drew, you say hello, I guess.
Hello.
We'll just try to make this like super awkward at first, and then we'll get used to it. It's really funny because Drew and I we're good friends. We see each other frequently. We're local to each other, but we don't ever work together like this. So it feels kind of funny. I don't know. Does it feel funny to you?
Yeah, it does a little bit. I mean, normally we're out running, we're always sweaty when we're running.
Exactly. I mean, did you even know my hair looked like this? No.
I've only seen it under a hat.
So Drew and I are running friends. We run together, I don't know, in good times, in non-COVID times, probably several times a week. But, here we all are doing our best. In fact, we'd probably be doing this interview in person, but instead we are here on Skype, staying socially distant.
Doing our best anyways.
So I wanted to take this field trip, and I don't know, do you remember how this all came about? It's funny. Like I said, we would see each other every Thursday at running group, and I was trying to kind of remember how we came to do such a thing, because it just kind of happened after a while. We were moving forward with it. Yeah,
I think at one point you had brought it up about wanting to travel around and see some of the houses or some of the sites that you had been doing research on. And one of the podcast listeners had reached out to you and presented this opportunity. And it had been a lot of talking, but since somebody reached out to you, it was kind of like, oh, there is an opportunity. Let's get this on the calendar. And I think that's kind of how it started.
And that person was Rhonda Deeg. She is the stained glass restorer that we've had an episode about. And she wanted me to meet her friend, Terry Wollenweber, who is the decorative plaster restoration specialist. And I guess I should go backwards just a little, take two steps back and have you tell us what your job is, because it wasn't, I mean, I don't just like pick up people off the street and say, hey, want to go do a field trip with me? There was a specific reason why I was interested in having you go.
Yeah, so my career is in architectural photography, and I do video work, and I have all the equipment to do whatever, what needed to be done as far as recording audio, shooting video, that type of thing. And I live in an old house as well, although probably not to the standard of many of your listeners, because the people we bought it from had completely gutted it and taken away all character.
I think that's a common theme amongst many old house owners. You're not alone in that. So anyway, Drew had a very specific set of skills, and I thought he's a lot of fun. I knew we get along, so he agreed to take this trip. And then suddenly we were on a 19 hours? It was on a really long car ride.
Oh, One Direction, I think it was only like 8 hours. No, it was 9 hours.
Okay. All right. With a couple stops and here and there. But yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It was funny because it felt like by the time we got home, I felt like we'd been gone for a week, but we'd really only been gone for like 2 days. I mean, we just like packed it in for sure. For sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Had you ever been to Louisville, Kentucky or New Albany, Indiana before?
I had not. No.
No. I had neither. And we were really only in Louisville for about 2 hours.
Yeah,
I
because only the church was in Louisville, correct?
Right. Yeah. The church was there. So we crossed the bridge. We went to the church. We saw Terry Street. Now, what did you think of the church? It was the
Emmanuel Baptist Church.
Thank you. I wrote down the major players on Post-it notes here for me, but I did not write down the Emmanuel Baptist Church. What was your impression of that? I mean, you didn't really know what we were going to see, so it was all kind of a big surprise.
Oh, yeah. I had no clue what to expect when I was showing up at a church. I grew up in Ohio. I grew up in an Amish and Mennonite area, so churches were by and large very modest. It was quite stately from the outside. I mean, it was beautiful from the outside.
Yeah, it almost looked like a federal building. Like when I first saw it, I was like, oh, it looks like a federal building. Stone and just pillars. And so when you went inside, what did you think? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I didn't realize they did that kind of plaster work in churches, at least over here anyways. I've been to Europe and I've seen beautiful, churches over there, but I just have never really experienced anything like that over here. For lack of a better term, the rotunda. You just don't see typically in churches like that. Usually, like around here in the Catholic churches, there's like a long nave leading up to the front of the church. But this with the large rotunda kind of encompassing the whole sanctuary was something unique. I had no expectations, so it was quite grand, all things considered.
Yes. Right. And I had this moment when I stepped in there and I saw all that decorative plaster work. And you're right, that dome ceiling leads up to a beautiful stained glass circle at top, and there's stained glass all over in every panel of that dome ceiling. And it caught my breath. It was so beautiful. It was so weird. Tears came to my eyes. I thought, oh gosh, I'm like one of those, I'm one of those ladies now that just cries at everything. But it was just so special being in there. And at the time too, which you can't hear in the video, but there was some sort of group and they were playing music. So the acoustics in the building were really incredible. And so this, music was just bouncing off, and the colors blue and yellow and white. It was just really something a little bit overwhelming, a real sensory experience that I wasn't even remotely expecting from a church. I probably should. I think probably lots of people have sensory experiences at church, but I have not. That's probably the best place to have one of those experiences. Yeah. So then after we went to the church, then New Albany's just right across the bridge. So what was it? Maybe 10 minutes away? They're really close together.
Yeah. I mean, it was surprisingly close. Yeah. It was just very interesting the way it was how close everything was and how quickly everything went from big city to the small town feel. Definitely.
Louisville is vibrant and things are happening there. And I'd like to go back. I'd like to really, because I kept seeing things as we were driving and I kept thinking, I wish we could stop and take pictures there or see that or do more of that. But yeah, when you're in New Albany, some places you can actually look across and you can see the bridge you crossed to go to Louisville, and you can see Louisville, but you happen to be in a completely different state. You're in in Indiana instead. But yeah, you're right. It went quickly to small town. And so then from there, we went to the Culbertson Mansion. And that ended up being, I don't know, that was kind of the highlight of my entire trip. You were also running around like a chicken with your head cut off, getting B-roll at the Culbertson Mansion. But I would like to know your impressions of that, what you thought you were getting into, what you got yourself into. And then we'll talk about kind of some fun stories of things that aren't going to make it on the video, that aren't going to make it on the podcast, things that we got to experience separately or fun.
I really wasn't sure what I was getting myself into, to be quite honest. Like, I had never heard of the Culbertson family, and so I had zero expectation as far as what this house was going to look like or the setting and that type of thing. I mean, here in New York, you have, I don't know if you've ever been to Poughkeepsie or in that area, kind of the Borscht Belt, where all of the aristocrats had their massive summer mansions out on the Hudson River and that type of thing. So when I think of the mansion, I was kind of envisioning something like Hyde Park almost, because that had been my experience with big mansions from turn of the century businessmen that had more money than we could ever conceive of. But this house was amazing, don't get me wrong, but it was nestled inside what seemed like a normal neighborhood. And then all of a sudden, here's this 20,000 square foot mansion.
French castle. I think they called it a French castle.
Yeah, exactly. You have one thing in your mind. Even locally, we have the Knox estate that had initially 3 houses on it, and they were all spaced far apart. And that's kind of what I envisioned. So to see something incorporated into the actual village was not what I was expecting. It was kind of cool to see, because you always think of the people of that time kind of separating themselves from the rest of society, and to see them, which in the story that was told about them kind of makes sense now. Yes, they had a lot of money, but they kind of viewed themselves as kind of being of the people as well.
Right, for sure.
Sense. Yeah.
It was my understanding that William Stewart Culbertson and his wives, who he had separately, there wasn't plural wives at one time. Anyway, he didn't want to be ostentatious about it. And I thought that was really interesting, because I was talking to the director of the site, and I told her, I said, oh, I'll look him up later. And she said, oh, you won't really find anything about him. And that's the way he wanted it. He wasn't there to show off his money and to prove that he had money. He just wanted to quietly help people and do the right thing. And I thought that was really pretty neat. The house was, like you said, huge and just kind of right in the middle of neighborhood. I thought it was interesting that his son had a house right next door. And It was kind of like the mini mansion. And when we got back from this trip, and I was telling somebody, I think on Instagram, I said, we saw the Culbertson Mansion, and they said, oh, that's for sale. And I thought, what? It's not for sale. Because, I thought we would have heard that if it was for sale. And when I went online, it turns out, and I guess I knew this that day was a long day, but the son's house is for sale. So the mansion next door. So if you are in the market for a miniature Culbertson mansion, there is one available right next door in New Albany, Indiana.
Yeah. And that was the one thing they were talking about. Jessica, the director, was mentioning that the current owners were starting to strip out some of the stuff out of the son's house, I think, to take to their next house.
Yes.
What it seemed like. And so they were, being that she was the director of the Culbertson Mansion, sad to see many of the beautiful pieces of architecture leaving the son's house, which was right next door. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, that made me sad. She said she was sitting in her office, and she said, and I saw them taking stained glass window out and taking it away. And I just thought, oh, that must be heartbreaking, to sit there. But so the house itself was 4 stories. I think she said 20,000 square feet, which would be 5,000 square feet on each floor. Is that correct? Is that how you remember it?
Yep. That's how I remember it.
Yeah, and it was built so that every floor was exactly the same. So they were stacked right on top of each other. It was pretty wild. We saw some really cool stuff. So in the video that you made, we're really only going to see the very kind of first floor. I think we hit some of the second floor, maybe the bedrooms, a couple of things in the video. But we got like the full tour, and they have been restoring this house for 30 years, I think. It's an ongoing restoration. It's so huge. And so the 4th floor hadn't even really been touched yet. And we got to go up there. Do you remember the story about the tool chest?
Yeah, I thought that was probably the highlight of the tour of that. Unfortunately, we never recorded that portion because just logistics and the way that the whole tour went. But the fact that they were able to get the original builders' tools back to the house was like from California, like shipped in from California or something like that. Yeah. The family of those two brothers that had helped or were the builders of this house, they had eventually ended up in California, or their family ended up in California with this giant toolbox. And somewhere inside the toolbox made mention that they had built the Culbertson Mansion. The family then did a little research. Wasn't this before the internet even?
I think so, but way more recently than when the house was built, which I can't remember the year. So I can't. Yeah, because I think they sent a letter or something, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't that the whole thing? Sent a letter?
It wasn't as simple as just going online and typing in Culbertson Mansion and coming up with something. A significant amount of effort went into finding out about the Culbertson Mansion by the builder's family, and the builder's family ended up donating all of the original tools that helped build the Culbertson Mansion back to the museum. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
I did too. So we got to see, I don't think they keep it open for anybody else, but Jessica opened it for us. It's a big wooden box. I don't know, probably, I don't even know the size of it, but just like a big heavy chest with like several layers. And there were like little hand press drills, and there were all kinds of tools. There was the original press stamps for the faux bois, which was the fake wood graining. So this entire house, this was what I thought was really interesting too, is that, they had all the money at their disposal, and she wanted a French castle. So she wanted this French technique of faux bois, which is basically fake graining, where you can use a little bit less expensive wood, but these people who made these grain patterns were artists. They were absolutely sought after as artisans. And they have these little tools that are kind of like almost what we envision as a rubber stamp. I didn't get to touch them, so I'm not exactly sure what they're made of. But, they kind of roll that pattern on, and then from there they hand fix anything that's a little unusual. And so we got to see this restored faux bois, and those tools came right from that chest, and everything that was used for the most part to build that house is now back in the house. And that was one of my favorite stories too.
Yeah, because that's something, I mean, again, you get into a number of these houses, and the ridiculousness has no end with gold leafing and this, that, and the other. But to actually see the tools that were used on the building of this house, you just never see that in anywhere else.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the things that stood out as truly unique about that location.
I thought so too. And I can't remember the entire bit of this story, and you may be able to fill in the gaps, or we may have to take this part out. But there was a stained glass window up there, and at one point during the day, the sun would come through the stained glass, and would it make a pattern, or it would make a rainbow or something like that. It was something really interesting about that one window. Yeah,
it was something about the way...
it went all the way downstairs.
Yes, it was something about the way that the staircase was situated in relation to this window, or the window was situated in relation to the staircase. That
on the fourth floor.
On the fourth floor, that at a certain time of day, the sun would come, and I think it had to be certain times of the year too. The sun would come streaming through this window and would basically create this shaft of light that would go, multiple colored light, all the way down to the first floor.
Right. That's it. That was neat. And that's another thing, people don't go to the fourth floor, so they don't really hear that story, which was kind of cool. But yeah, can you imagine just the thought that was put into building that? I mean, who would think of that now? Who would spend the time to think of that little detail and work that out? I mean, I can't even tell you what time of year that would work, but somebody else knows all the details, or knew the details and figured it out.
I thought the other thing, and this has nothing to do with the actual production of the house, but it has to do a lot, I guess, with the preservation of the house, was all the coal soot that preserved all of the paint underneath of it. That basically, because there was all this smoke constantly in the house that lined the walls, that every time they would paint over top of the original paint, it never really adhered to those original frescoes all that well. Right. And because there was all this dirt on the wall, they were able to remove the layers and layers and layers of paint to uncover the original frescoes on the wall.
That's right. Yeah.
On the 4th floor, they have, and I would hope that they would stop the preservation at some point, because I think it's super cool to see how thick the coal soot was on all those walls on the 4th floor, just to give you an idea of how dirty it actually was, because, it was the only way they were heating the house. But to get an understanding of how thick the black soot was all over the walls to preserve what's now visible on the first and 2nd floor.
Yeah, and we could go through and just touch it with our fingers or fingernails. We were encouraged to do that, and it was thick. Can you imagine what their lungs looked like after living in a house like that? My goodness.
Oh, I know.
It'd be like
right?
smoking several packs a day or something, right? I don't know. Yeah, that was really interesting with the, and it's funny because when I come at it from a preservation point of view, now those are the exact problems that annoy me. Like when people don't use the proper bonding primer, when they don't do the proper prep between different types of paint. And then I'm stuck, scraping off the mistakes. And of course, in this respect, that mistake is really, or continuous set of mistakes is what preserved all those frescoes in the first place. You took some video footage of all that, and you'll have to go see it on the show notes, because it's really something else to see those colors. I quite unexpected. There were a few other interesting, funny things. I mean, we both have like the same story when we're talking about the basement, which we'll get there. But are there anything before we get to the basement that you want to talk about or mention? Or
I guess the one thing that stood out to me is like the and this isn't funny, but the pink bedroom on the 2nd floor, just seeing those colors come out of an early home was shocking in the sense that we're told, yes, those are the original colors that were used in this bedroom. I've just never seen that before. Normally it's a lot of really dark and rich tones, and this looked like a 13-year-old girl's cotton candy dreams painted on the ceiling or whatever. And I had just I'd never seen that in a house before of that age. So I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really neat too. I mean, in fact, that's why it didn't really hit me at first that what I was seeing was original colors, because I was expecting something much more mundane, or not, like you said, cotton candy dream fancy. Well, I guess we should talk about the basement. The basement was kind of funny. Well, first thing I'm going to say is that the kitchen is in the basement, which I thought was really cool, because the whole house is this fancy, formal house. And then you realize, oh yeah, these people had to eat too. So where was all the food made? Well, it was made in the basement. And that was the room I probably felt the most comfortable in. It felt the most homey to me. It was kind of a beautiful yellow woodwork. One whole wall was the cook stove, fireplace. It was a really warm and comfortable room. And if I had to spend a lot of time in the Culbertson Mansion, I think that I would have preferred to be in the kitchen rather than those formal, uptight rooms upstairs.
Yeah, well, I think it also helped that it didn't have, was it 20-foot ceilings or 17-foot ceilings or something like that the rest of the floors have. It had a normal 8-foot ceiling in the basement.
Right, yes.
The doors on the first, second, and the second and third floors, or whatever floors were way oversized too. So I mean,
they were 10 foot or something, right?
Something
were they
like
10
that.
foot doors? Yeah.
I'm 6'3", and I felt like I was being dwarfed by everything in there.
Do you remember that time we needed a table from Jessica, and she went over to the supply closet, which was basically this giant 10-foot door with a rounded top, and opens it up and pulls out this tiny little table. Here, will this work?
Yeah.
Even the supply closets are fancy. Yeah, downstairs in the basement, the ceilings were lower. It had a basement feel. There was laundry, cleaning, all kinds of. That's where the worker bees were. They were down there, people taking care of that. But there was something else down there. Do you want to tell that story?
The decoration. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, but how was it described to us? It wasn't described to us as that. It was described as William Culbertson's body was downstairs. That's how it was described to us.
Yeah. So essentially, and I think you consistently find this with a lot of these houses. This wasn't necessarily the case with the Culbertson Mansion, but many times, as these huge mansions get passed down from generation to generation, at some point, one of the generations runs out of money to be able to maintain a huge mansion, and so they donate it to the state. That's how New York State got a lot of their mansions out in the Hudson Valley. The Culbertson Mansion was the last state property, or last property that the state of Indiana actually purchased. At least that's what Jessica had said.
Right. It became a historic site, the last historic site.
And so I'm sure, even though they acquired it differently, probably go through the same struggles of finding ways to maintain and upkeep a house of that size and all that goes into it. And so the people at the Culbertson Mansion had come up with this brilliant idea.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
To make money to help support the restoration and just the funding of the maintenance to go along with the mansion was was it like a murder mystery type thing?
It was. Well,
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Let me preface this first, because you're on the right. But there's a reason why they said they have this body of William Stewart Culbertson down in the basement, and it's in a coffin. So how it came about was that there was somebody who makes wax statues of Darwin. And while he was working on a wax statue, he'd been to the Culbertson House Museum. He saw the picture of William Stewart Culbertson and thought to himself, hey, Darwin kind of looks like Mr. Culbertson. I wonder if they'd like a statue. So he made a wax statue, closed eyes, basically looks like the body of William Stewart Culbertson, and donated him to the Culbertson Mansion, where they put him in a wooden coffin. And then now you can take the story away. Because I think when she told us that they had this, you and I kind of looked at each other like, what?
Well, yeah. When she initially said they had his body in the basement, I'm thinking, did they like have him mummified in the basement, or
or a urn, full of ashes or something? Was what I was thinking too. And then I thought, wow, this is weird. I don't really know if I want to see that.
And so we go down into the basement, and tucked in a back corner somewhere is this casket, and she opens up the one end, and there he lies. So that they can, every year they can do a haunted house. Was it a haunted house or a murder?
Well, they do his funeral. They do his funeral. Relive his funeral.
That's right.
That's the first thing. And I guess you and I were both kind of standing there sort of reverently. Like, we were a little confused. Like, how do we approach this? She was like, oh, people take pictures with his body. People do this. And I think you and I were both looking at each other like, I don't really know how we should handle this. Like, how should we feel about this? But then, and I'll let you talk, because the rest of the story, then it starts to make more sense, what they do and why they do it. So go ahead.
No, you probably remember more than I do on this.
All right. So yes, every year they relive his funeral, and people come to the Culbertson Mansion, and they have a funeral for Mr. Culbertson, and they read his will. And then they read it almost like a melodrama. So people come and they dress up, and, they'll say, so-and-so gets my money, and people will stand up in the audience like, I should get more money than her. And, I should. So they have this every year, and that's one of their fundraising ideas. So then I started to kind of soften to the idea, because I figured, she said, we think that he wouldn't mind this, because that was kind of the person that he was. He wasn't formal, he wasn't snooty, he wasn't concerned with his appearance, they're being respectful. And so then they have these other fundraising opportunities, and you were about to talk, they do murder mysteries, they also do the Clue, they do Clue Night.
Yep.
Yeah, so go ahead, explain how Clue Night works.
Well, I mean, my understanding was it was set up very similar, because they have all of these rooms, like multiple bedrooms and the dining room and the parlor and the office and all that kind of stuff. And so they have a murder mystery with Mr. Culbertson as the person murdered, and you have to, throughout the night, figure out who murdered Mr. Culbertson and in what room with what. And it was just a cool idea. I mean, I guess if I had died and people wanted to do, like, I'm dead, like, what do I care if they use my name and to help maintain a site that somebody finds important? Like, more power to you, right?
Right, exactly. I hope that people would have that much fun remembering me or appreciating things and if I could bring some happiness to somebody, and that would that would thrill me. Yeah. Like you said, I'm dead. What do I care?
Yeah. Well, I also think it probably gives at least locally some longevity to the name. Otherwise, it's just the Culbertson Mansion, and it's, you know what I'm saying? Like it's kind of stops there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many people here locally know much about the Knoxes. Not a lot gets talked about them other than the fact that they have now a state park with the Knox name on it. But most people couldn't tell you how they made their money or anything about them. Whereas in a situation like with the Culbertson Mansion, it gives them an opportunity to share his life, making a little bit of money, but share his life and tell people about what was important to him and how he lived his life and that type of thing. And so I think it in some ways keeps him somewhat relevant when otherwise he would just be a name lost in history as time goes on.
And if it takes a wax statue to make that happen, then they're onto something, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. It's fun to talk about this with you again because it kind of relive all those memories that were at the time. We were just so crazy busy running back and forth. We didn't have a whole lot of time to really appreciate all of that. I guess that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. I guess one thing that surprised me about the whole trip is just how Southern we were. Like I didn't realize, I mean, when I think of Indiana, I don't think of Southern. Kentucky, I think of as Southern. It was interesting, different hospitality, very kind people, and I enjoyed it.
I had never been to Southern Indiana before. You're down along the Ohio River. Definitely a difference. Like the farther north you go into Ohio, and I think probably similar in Indiana, you have some more of the big cities. You have Indianapolis and Fort Wayne and that type of stuff in the northern half of the state of Indiana, much like you have Columbus and Cleveland in the northern half of Ohio. And the farther south you get, you don't realize how much it changes and how quickly it can change.
Mm-hmm. Till people start,
yawling you.
Yawling, yeah. Or ma'am. Of course, I get ma'amed all the time anyway. Ma'am, sweetheart, darling, that kind of thing. Yes, that's me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the waitress at the restaurant we had, she was as Southern as I think I've ever heard anybody talk. I lived in Virginia for a while and got the sweethearts and it was, I remember when I lived in Virginia, I was like 19 or 20 and I'm going to college, and some girl who I was trying to get down an aisle to a seat in class, and I said, "Excuse me," and she was like, "Oh, no problem, sweetheart." And I'm thinking, like, you can't be any older than I am. Why are you it's always, but it's just the way that they talk. I mean, it's just their lexicon. Yeah. And so,
yeah, for sure. And I think I told you about the guy I was waiting in line for the restrooms. Did I tell you that? Yeah, I told you that story. There was a man there. So there was three of us, and there were two restrooms, three of us waiting. He was ahead of me. The first woman took the restroom. The second one became available, and he said, "You should go." And I said, "Oh, no, you're fine." He goes, "Oh, no, my daddy would bust my backside if I didn't let you go first." I thought, that's so nice. Thank you. But I was not prepared for that at all. It was really funny. It was cute.
No, because at that point we were in Indiana. It wasn't even like we were in Kentucky at that point. And so it was not shocking, but just kind of not what I was prepared for, and kind of funny, I guess.
It was nice. It was endearing. I liked it. It was I enjoyed being there, and I really would like to go back at some point, I think, and see some other things. I know now that there's such a rich history in that area that there's plenty more to see and plenty more to learn. Thank you so much for going along with me. Under the right circumstances, do you think you'd do it again? Go someplace different?
Oh yeah, sure.
The videos will be on the show notes. There's a video from the Culbertson Mansion. There's a video from Emmanuel Baptist Church. There will be lots of pictures from both places. I took a ton of pictures. I don't think that you ended up taking very many pictures because you were busy videoing, but I took a lot.
Yeah, I didn't take any pictures, I don't think. Other than I did take a picture of Mr. Culbertson just because. But I really didn't take many pictures at all because I was running around shooting video the whole time. So.
And I appreciate all the work that you did. Thanks for going with me.
Oh yeah, not a problem. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses. You'll find everything you need to know about today's episode, including links and transcripts, over on our website, truetalesfromoldhouses.com.
Until next time.
Bye for now.